This is Senator Angus King with the Veterans History Project. Today I'm interviewing Cornelius James Ware, who lives in Fairfield, Maine, about his experience in the military and the work he's now doing with veterans. James, it's great to meet you, if only electronically, and I'm delighted you're willing to take a little time with us today.
Pleasure's mine, Senator.
Well, here's what I wanted to start with is a little bit of chronology. I understand you had all kinds of relatives that were in the military, so probably in your case, the question wasn't whether you would join; it would be which branch.
That is true. I was a Army brat, and my dad was career Army, but I chose the Navy. So that started quite a stir in the family.
Now, did you enlisted right out of high school? Is that right?
That is correct.
And did your high school have an ROTC or a junior ROTC program?
We did. And the funny thing about that is my sophomore year is the year they started the ROTC, the junior ROTC program at my high school. And we were fortunate enough to have Admiral Zumwalt come and christen, commission our unit.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, he's like one of the greatest names in naval history.
Yes, sir.
Where were you? Where were you in high school?
Um, I attended Cape Fear Senior High. It's in Stedman, North Carolina.
Okay, okay. Well, so now there's again the way life changes for us in these little ways. Probably if you hadn't had that ROTC program in high school, you might not have ended up in the Navy. I mean, and it just started a couple of years before you joined, right?
That's correct.
Now, okay, so you graduate from high school, you're in the Navy, you're 17 years old. What happens next?
What happens next is I go through basic training. I got set back for a couple of weeks because I couldn't pass the requirements to inflate pants and float. Once I passed that, they passed me on, and I
Now,
went.
wait a minute. What was it you couldn't pass?
Well, at that time, you didn't have to know how to swim, but you had to be able to inflate a pair of pants to float.
Huh.
And I failed the first time I tried it. They sent me through 2 weeks of going down to the pool every day and practicing, and finally took the test again, was able to do it, joined joined another company, went through training. So basically had to learn how to float, even though I don't swim.
Okay. Well, I got this image of the guy joining the Navy who doesn't float, but fortunately, it sounds like you crossed that threshold. So, you went to basic. Did you go to Great Lakes?
No, I went to Orlando, Florida. Funny thing, you ask a 17-year-old, where do you want to go to basic? And of course, being a young 17-year-old, I was like, well, where do the women train? Oh, they train in Orlando. Okay, well, send me to Orlando.
Okay. Well, there you go. So, how long was the basic? Was the program?
Got there in July, graduated in September, took 2 weeks of leave, and then went to Great Lakes for my follow-on training. So roughly, supposedly 6, 7 weeks, I think.
And was most of your career spent on surface combatants?
It was, with the exception of the times I went to shore duty.
Okay. Well, what was your first job in the Navy? What was the first job on the first ship?
Was an operations specialist, which is basically a radarman. So that's what I did for my first 4.5 years on my first ship, the USS San Diego. I joined them in the Mediterranean in January of '77 as a seaman, and I left there in June of 81 as a second class or E5.
And what do you mean to define radarman? What was your daily hour-to-hour job? Literally looking at that screen and seeing what excuse me, what you had in the way of bogeys on the screen?
Um, the ship I was on at the time was a supply ship, so we didn't have air search radar. We had a surface search radar. So the surface search radar that we had on board roughly had a range, surface range of about 25, 30 miles. So our job was to track surface vessels so that we didn't have a collision at sea. And we also did radar navigation when we were coming in and out of port to keep the ship from running aground.
Well, as you know, we had a couple of serious collisions out in the Pacific a couple of years ago, and uh, I wondered at the time how that could happen given the radar capabilities. Did you sort of scratch your head when you read about those events?
I did, especially where a lot of the ships that are out there now have automated radars that put a radar track on. When I started out, we sat on a radar scope with a grease pencil and we would mark the little dot and track it by marking the little dot. And we draw lines and we do maneuvering board calculations to track it, see how close we're going to come. And if we're going to come too close, and by rules of the road, we didn't have the right of way, we would make a recommendation to the bridge, and the bridge had their watch team, and we'd compare notes. And if we were in concurrence, then we would maneuver around those obstacles or maneuver away from the ships that were hazardous.
Well, it strikes me that's a pretty responsible job for a 18, 19-year-old. So I think one of the things, check me out on this, but one of the things about the military is you get more responsibility at a younger age than practically anywhere else in our society. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are.
And so you had a key role on that ship as a young guy. You said you did that basically operations and radarman for 4.5 years. Then where were you after that?
After that, I went to shore duty in Morristown, New Jersey. At that time, they were working on the Aegis project, and so I was sent there to be a operator for testing the program, testing the radar, and so forth. So I was there for 2 years, and while I was there, I was promoted to first class E6, and we trained the crew for the USS Ticonderoga, which was the first Aegis cruiser. And once we finished their training, as I was getting ready to leave and go back out to sea, I had an opportunity to go to the second Aegis cruiser, the USS Yorktown. So I joined the Yorktown's crew in October of '83.
Now, isn't there a special name for that being in the initial crew? It's the nucleus crew or something like that?
Right, we are the pre-com, and the pre-com usually mans up in three phases. There's like phase one, two, and three. Phase one is the guys that are the first ones there. Phase two comes on board in time to help do the Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie trials. And then phase three is when you bring the rest of the crew on board as you're bringing the ship to life and the Navy is taking ownership of the ship.
Now, I have to skip ahead and ask, did you ever serve on a Bath ship, on a Bath Aegis destroyer?
I served on a Bath cruiser, the USS Thomas S. Gates. So I was on the Yorktown from '83 to '86, and I went to the pre-com of the Thomas S. Gates in '86. After I completed a tackle school in Ronkonkoma, New Jersey, Ronkonkoma, New York, I ended up going to Thomas S. Gates. I arrived in Bath in March of '87.
Okay. I lived in Brunswick then, so we probably passed each other on the street.
Yes, sir.
Uh, how, and how long were you there? Was this waiting for the ship to be completed?
Again, it was waiting for the ship to be completed. I got there in time to take the ship out for Alpha Bravo Charlie trials, and then we brought the rest of the crew on board, and we left to be commissioned in Philadelphia in '87. In
It's pretty
August.
hairy. It's pretty hairy taking one of those ships down the Kennebec River, isn't it?
It was, but it was kind of fun. I mean, basically, we we didn't seem to have any problems. I mean, the first two
Well,
during the trials, the Navy doesn't own the ship, so we're being piloted by their crew, and
yeah.
when we took it down the river as we were leaving to go down to Norfolk, or go to Philadelphia for the commissioning, I it was pretty nice compared to when we had to go up the Delaware to go to Philadelphia, because it was
Ah,
a little bit busier there.
yeah,
Not as
I think it
busy
would
going
be.
down to Kennebec.
It would be. It would be. But yeah, I know Bath has their special pilots who are experts on going down that river and going around Doubling Point and down by Seguin Island. It's pretty rough water down there.
Right.
So now, were you doing the same function on the Ticonderoga and the gates that you'd done initially, or were you doing something else? Was it still basically radar work?
Radar work, but now I was a air controller. So the ship, when we were deployed, had two embarked lamps, Mark III helicopters, HS-60s. So that was my primary task, was to control those when they were out hunting submarines or looking for surface vessels, things of that nature.
Okay, now we've covered about 10 years of a 23-year career. Take me through where you went from the gates.
Uh, well, I made two deployments on the gates. The first one was just a regular med cruise. During that time, we went to Sevastopol, Russia, in the Crimea. And then, as I was getting ready to go to shore duty at SWAS in Newport, um, we got called up to go to deploy for Desert Storm, Desert Shield. So
Okay.
I ended up going to the Red Sea as part of the JFK battle group. While I was there, I got promoted to Chief E7. So when I reported to my shore duty command at SWAS, the Surface Warfare Officer School in Newport, I was sent there to be a Aegis instructor. So I got there roughly in '91 and stayed until I was sent back out to sea in '94.
So you were an instructor at Newport, and did you take officer training, or how did that work? You ended up an officer, didn't you?
Right, but at the time I was in Newport, I was actually training officers. I was training junior officers, I was training mid-grade officers, and I was also training foreign officers in basic CIC, like maneuvering board, and we had a little warfare scenario computer called Beefit that did little basic warfighting problems that we did with the foreign officers that were being trained by our military. And while I was there, I participated in a program for enlisted officers. It's called the LDO, which is Limited Duty Officer, where you get commissioned as an ensign, or the Warrant Officer program, where you get commissioned as a Chief Warrant Officer. So I had some good friends, mentors, and couple of officers that thought I had the potential for it. They talked me into doing it. They tried to talk me into doing it when I first got to shore duty. I was like, with my luck, I apply, I'm going to get picked up, and I'm going to have to leave shore duty. So I waited until my last year of shore duty to apply, and I had actually transferred to the USS Bella Gulf when I found out I had been picked up for the warrant officer program.
Well, it's nice to hear that the Navy recognized talent and has a pathway for talented enlisted people to become officers, and so you're not locked in for your whole career.
Yes, sir.
That's a real plus, it seems to me. Uh, so did you so after you became a warrant officer, what were your future assignments after that?
My future assignment after that, I was assigned to the USS Cole pre-commissioning crew for the Cole. She was built down in Pascagoula, so I joined the Cole after I attended knife and fork school in 95. And so I stayed on the Cole until I retired in 99.
The
During that time, I
Cole,
was the electronic.
the na-
During that time, I was the electronic warfare officer, so I controlled the electronic warfare suite. I had a division of 8 EWs and one intelligence specialist because we also were part of the ship's intel team.
and was this in the Middle East? Were you deployed?
Our first deployment was to the Persian Gulf in support of Operation Southern Watch.
I was on a DDG in the Persian Gulf a couple of years ago. It's a tough place. I mean, we could see on the radar, you could see the Iranian patrol boats that would come up and then they'd back off, and they were always around. I mean, there's so much traffic in there.
Yes, it is.
Now, when you were there, I saw in some notes that you had to take the ship through Gibraltar or someplace without radar or just by visual, or tell me about that.
Okay, that was when we were on the Thomas S. Gates. After we completed our first maiden deployment, the battle group commander wanted to do a MCON navigation. So MCON means that you shut down all of your essential sensors that would identify you as a military vessel. So you turn off your surface search radars, your air search radars, and so forth. But we kept the only system we kept up was our Hawk link to be able to talk to our helicopter. Our helicopter was flying, and we had to make sure we kept them in international airspace. So our helicopter would go up, run their radar, and they linked their picture back to us, and then we submitted our link picture to the rest of the battle force so they could see what our helicopter was seeing. So we
So,
took
is this kind of a stealth exercise? Is this designed to be able to operate without the adversary seeing your radar signature?
that is correct, and I don't know if they had tried that before, but we tried it and we successfully got the battle group through. Imagine 7 surface ships and a carrier.
I'm
Nobody ran.
guessing I'm guessing there was a little tension on that passage.
There was, there was, but we made it through safe and sound.
Now, talk to me about life in the Navy in those days. I mean, did you feel you were supported well, and the recognition you got to go to the officer school was a positive? Was it? Did you ever have any second thoughts? Said, why didn't I join the Army? Or how was life on board?
Life on board ship was good. The only reason I even thought about the Army growing up was that I thought maybe I could do father-son duty with my dad, but he retired in 74. So since he was no longer active, my choices were, what do you want to do? And the Navy, believe it or not, was not my first choice. I actually chose the Air Force. But the Air Force said my ASVAB scores weren't high enough for them. So then I went to the Navy recruiter. They told me I could do just about anything I wanted to do except be a nuke. So I was like, okay, I don't want to be a nuke anyway. I don't want to be stuck on a submarine or a carrier. So
Yeah.
that worked out well. I feel I was well supported throughout my career. I mean, it started with my first ship. Uh, my my division chief was a very good mentor, and he looked at the potential of us and he encouraged us. In fact, he actually tried to encourage me to go the to apply for NAPS, which is the Naval Academy prep school in Newport when I was young, and I thought about it, but again, being a young kid, I was like, well, I'm enjoying my time as an enlisted guy. I mean, I made third class E4, and I was enjoying life as an enlisted man. I At that time I didn't want to be an officer, but I did want to continue to pursue my Navy career. So I just decided I'd stay in the enlisted ranks because I was having fun, and I was well respected for my position as petty officer, and I felt groomed and, en- encouraged. I had great success, and I really enjoyed my time on board the San Diego. And when I got to leave to San Diego and go to shore duty, again, I was mentored by a couple of chiefs that, I made first class, and I ended up taking over the division from another first class. And so I was given a lot of responsibility,
Well,
which,
that's what chiefs do. I mean, you'll enjoy this. I was talking to some of the brass at the Pentagon, and they were saying that one of the problems the Russians are having in Ukraine is that they don't develop their non-coms the way we do.
right,
That they don't have leadership at the lower level. If the general gets knocked off, or if their communications go out, they don't know what to do. And
right,
one of the strengths of our military, as you know, is in the chiefs and the sergeants.
right. Yep. And the Navy, I felt back then, the Navy was very good, especially in their schooling. They made sure they had a course that was leadership management development course for all levels from E4 up through E7 and above. So, as you advance, you would go through the LMET course for E4, E5, E6, and E7. So I went to
Now,
numerous LMET courses throughout my career. They even have one for a junior officer.
now you served 23 years, and when you retired, uh, I want to ask about the transition from active duty to veteran, because that's one of the things I hear from a lot of veterans. It's not the best of it's not a warm handoff, and a
Right,
lot of people retire from active duty, and there's they don't know they don't know all the options that are available to them. Tell me about how your transition occurred.
well, I think it went well. I mean, compared to some of the horror stories I've heard from some other veterans since I've been in this job. I mean, I attended TAPS class. TAPS class was very thorough, gave us all the information we needed, and as soon as I came to Maine, first thing I did was came out to VA and started my claims process. I took advantage of the Career Center. They helped me get grounded and get a job. And a lot of people like, well, why don't you go down to VIW and get a job? I was like, I've spent 23 years around ships and stuff. I'd like to try something new. So I was fortunate enough to get picked up at a vending company that was run by two Navy veterans of all things. So
Sure.
I fit right in there. And they were very, very supportive of me throughout my 9 years with the company. And The one obstacle I had to overcome was at that time, I did not drive standard vehicle. So I had to learn how to drive a standard. So
Okay, you had to learn how to use a clutch.
exactly. So
Got it.
I finally learned that. So
Now, listen, I got to ask you, how did you land in Maine? You traveled all over with the Navy. You mentioned you were in Bath for a while, but you were lots of different places.
right.
What brought you to Maine?
Um, well, while I was going through pre-com, I met a Maine girl, and at the time she had three boys, and we started dating. We hit it off, and so we got engaged, got married. Between her and I, we had a set of twins. That's my daughter and youngest boy. So we got together 2 weeks after I got in Maine, and we got married a year later. And I moved
Wow.
her and the family down to Virginia. And then after I left the Thomas S. Gates, we moved to Rhode Island. And when I was getting ready to leave to go to shore duty, I go back to sea. We were like, well, do we want to buy a house in Maine or do we want to buy a house in Virginia? And I figured Maine was a great place to raise kids. And while I was at sea, she'd be near her family and stuff. So we bought a little house in West Gardner, Maine. And so
Fabulous.
that's where we lived and raised the kids. So when my time
Well,
was up, it was unfortunately we ended up getting divorced. But I wanted to be near my kids while they were growing up. So my choice was, of course, was to come back to Maine so I could be a part of my kids' life while they were growing up.
now, when you were in the Navy, did you have any involvement in drug interdiction missions?
We did on the actually on two ships. One was the when I was on the Gates, we did a drug interdiction, and when I was on the USS Bella Gulf, we did a drug cruise where we did drug interdictions.
Was that down in the Caribbean or off of South America?
That was down in the Caribbean. The closest we got to South America was Curacao.
Okay. Yeah, that's
But
pretty close.
right,
Well, listen, tell me about what you're doing now because of all things, you ended up at the Veterans Administration.
yes, sir. So now I'm the state veteran service officer for the VFW. It's funny how I got here. I had in 2008, I had filed for a increase on one. I had filed a claim, and I would just
A
walked into
claim, a
the
claim with the VA,
a claim
a
with the
VA
VA
claim.
through the
Okay.
VFW, and I walked into the VFW office to check on the status of my claim. Um, when I walked in, the gentleman that was here said, "Well, we have two job openings if you're interested in a job." And at the time, I had been out of work for about 6 months, but before I left vending, I had put away a bunch of money so I'd have something for the lean times. And I was just getting to the point where I was starting to run out. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to school this semester, but I'm willing to take the part-time job because they had a part-time for 20 hours. And I said, well, that fits. That'll allow me to go to school and still work and get my feet wet. So I did that. Another gentleman came in. He took the other position that was open, and about a year later, he left. At that time, I was no longer going to school, and they offered me the assistant position. So I moved up to the assistant position, and then in 2016, the gentleman who hired me and had been the service officer for 17 years retired. So I moved over and took his position. And I've been in this office 13 going on 14 years now. And so
Wow,
it's
that's
been a
amazing.
wonderful journey.
It sounds like it. I mean, but the common denominator, James, is service, and you've been providing service to the country and the Navy and to your fellow veterans as the VSO for VFW at Togus. I mean, that's so important, particularly to people, and you see them every day, who don't really know what's available to them and what their options are, and you can guide them and advocate for them. I gotta recognize the great work that you're doing, because everybody I talk to that is in and out of Togus is very positive about the service that they get, the dedication of the people, and you're sure one of them.
Thank you very much. Yep, and it's been a very good teamwork effort here. I mean, it's just like when I was in the service. It was always teamwork. You might be on another ship, but you could always go to see your counterpart on a different ship, and you could get the help you needed. And it's kind of like that here. I mean, I could go to other VSOs for like the Legion, DAV, and so forth, and we can talk about things. I can pick their brain. We can help each other. And it's the same thing with some of the coaches in the VA team here. They're always willing to go above and beyond to help. And that just makes the team that much stronger, because we can work together. I've heard horror stories from my counterparts in other states, and I'm like, well, I don't have that problem here. They're always willing to help us.
Yeah, and one of my favorite sayings is, all of us are always smarter than any of us.
Right.
So that was work. Well, James Ware, thank you for the time today, and thank you for the service, both on active duty, and then what you're doing now for veterans. You've had two distinct but really important careers. Thank you for what you've done and for what you're still doing, and for taking some time for this history project that's going to be there for a long time at the Library of Congress. Any final thoughts or words you want to throw in, knowing that you're talking to history?
Well, it's been a pleasure, sir, and I'm just glad that my daughter, who is a captain in the New Hampshire Guard, is picked up the mantle and is carrying the torch for our family. So she's carrying on the family tradition. And when we go to Army Navy games, yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I've heard how that works. Well, again, thank you so much, Chief, and it's been great to be with you, and I look forward to meeting you in person at Togus the next time I'm up there. And by the way, you ought to go down to Portland and check out the new Seabach. It's something else. You can send people there with absolutely good feeling about it, because it's a great new facility.
Sounds good. Oh, and I also wanted to thank you personally for when you were the governor of the great state of Maine. My youngest boy, who was a Cub Scout at the time, had the opportunity to come and visit with you, and
Oh, wow.
got a picture of that news clipping that he did, and you were very gracious in sending a signed picture to him. When I gave that to him, he was just thrilled.
Oh, that's great. I'm delighted to hear that. I had a 4-year-old at about that same time, so I know what you're talking about. Thanks again. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.